So, what if you have actually spent your entire life with a sense of self worth that has been tied to how others see you and what it is that others actually want for you? And what if, with that, your personality has actually developed based around that, seeking self through other rather than seeking self through self? A lot of people actually have themselves in this dilemma. They find themselves waking up from this entire structure where they've created a personality based around what it is that other people want rather than what it is that they want for themselves. And now, the fascinating thing is that they would like to step outside of that, but they risk annihilation of that comfortable and familiar self. So, how do you approach this from a practical standpoint? A lot of this has to do with setting boundaries and developing a healthy sense of self, a healthy ego state, right? Because the reality of the matter is that you spent many years unconsciously and subconsciously tied to all of these other people's opinions and beliefs of you. And you've actually created yourself based around that. And it's unhealthy because you're not actually being authentic to yourself. You're not actually being authentic to what it is that you want, who it is that you want to be. You've just allowed yourself to be tied to all of these different ideas that other people create for you. Whether or not you're good enough is based around how they see you. What if you could instead take a step back from that and realize that you have power that you didn't previously see? And that power is in you taking your energy and attention away from them and bringing it back to yourself. A lot of people that have learned to tie their sense of self-worth to the external, which is extrinsic self-worth, they've tied it to identities based on how other people see them, and they feel only good enough based on how other people see them, or they don't feel good enough based on how other people see them. So isn't it wild then that you could actually look at that and see it for what it is, as externalized, as your self-worth being only you worthy as this person that is this way for these people. And unfortunately, for many people, there's no other way that you can be for them other than this character that you've played for them. But now you want to take yourself back, you want to take your life back because you're starting to realize that there actually is far more in store for you. This is essentially the annihilation of the self that was created for these other people, right? Because you were raised in an environment of survival. You were raised in dysfunctional dynamics where you learned that you were only worthy if you did X, Y, and Z, or if you achieved X, Y, and Z, and that there was no other way. People that are raised this way learn to sabotage themselves. They learn to neglect themselves. They learn to abandon themselves. They learn to live lives that are not authentic to what their inner universe is trying to sing to them. And that's the reality of this. You could absolutely step away and live an entire life that is of your choosing. And it might be uncomfortable because when you've learned to tie your self-worth to how other people see you and who you are based on how other people see you and what other people have validated you for, and you've learned that self-worth is an extrinsic game because you seek validation, and it's reinforced for you everywhere in society, specifically in social media where everyone is looking for validation and approval. It can be very challenging to get away from that. That is very comfortable and familiar for a lot of people. However, an entire life outside of that, where you validate and approve of yourself, where you stop wearing all of these comfortable and familiar masks that you don't actually want to wear, is possible for you. It's fascinating because a person might visualize themselves in a house like structure way up in the sky with all of these signs in the house that remind them of who they are, but their limitations based on what has been unconsciously and subconsciously created for them and portrayed to them by the people around them because they've learned to tie their sense of self-worth to the external. Stepping outside of that identity would require you stepping outside of the door of that house. It is a single unit house up in the sky with paper thin glass around the edge of it. And you'd love to walk out and see what else there is. But you're terrified because not only is it high up and you would fall to the annihilation of the present self that has that person's sense of self-worth tied to all these comfortable and familiar things, but there's this massive universe outside of it that has yet to be explored, that has yet to be understood, that has yet to be eaten and, just consumed. Everything, this physical reality. There's so much more than everything that we've learned about ourselves growing up, especially if you were raised in an environment of dysfunction where you had to survive and you had to learn to wear all these different masks. The reality of the matter is that a lot of us did learn to wear these masks. It's not good or bad or right or wrong. It's just not healthy, because if you learn to wear a mask when you were between 0 and 5, and you unfortunately either forgot to take that mask off or didn't learn how to, you've been wearing that mask. And that mask is probably based on the external, right? The sense of self-worth of that mask is probably based on the external. Maybe you learn to be a certain way for somebody in survival, and you don't know how to take that mask off. And that mask is what's keeping you trapped inside of comfort and familiarity, that until you awaken from that state and you actually understand what's going on, you won't blink a fucking eye. You won't bat an eye. You won't turn your head. A lot of people are stuck inside of identities that are unhealthy, that are actually based on extrinsic self-worth. And maybe you are one of them. Maybe you're waking up and maybe you're realizing that you don't want to continue to live the way that you've been living. Maybe you want to bring your sense of self-worth back to yourself. Because intrinsic self-worth is a real thing. And it is a healthy thing. Extrinsic self-worth is a real thing, but it is an unhealthy thing. And it's actually based on, quite oftentimes, illusions, instability, and things that are just not sustainable over the long term. I don't know anybody who would want to live a life that is based on something external in terms of self-worth, with loads and loads of ups and downs and instability and unpredictability. That's what extrinsic self-worth is all about. Listen to this, when you tie your sense of self-worth to something out there, you are then vulnerable to the movements of anything. It doesn't matter what it is. It could be a character, a face, it doesn't matter what it is, right? Out there is unstable. In here is stable. In here is healthy. Anything about you that's based on anything out there is unhealthy. Whenever the thing out there moves, you move. To help you understand this, if you tie your sense of self-worth to a position, right, and you're happy when you have the position, but then you're sad when you lose it, that's up and down and up and down. But when you are the determiner, the number one determiner and the only determiner of yourself, you don't have this. You have this consistently. Intrinsic self-worth is an incredible experience, and extrinsic self-worth, where you tie your sense of self-worth to other people based on your lack of self-esteem, your insecurities, and hoping that other people will validate and approve of you, leaves you exceedingly vulnerable to a very fucked up life over the long term. And I don't know anybody that would want that. You can do whatever you choose. Anybody can. We all have free human agency, but I don't understand why anybody would.